Apple got rid of the $429 iPhone SE line and replaced it with a $599 iPhone 16e, which is hilarious and expected. Oh, you forgot when Apple got rid of the $700 iPhone 13 mini for the $900 iPhone 14 Plus? The beginning, however, is a little bit misrepresented. You see, at $599, the iPhone 16e is actually great value. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and if you have seen my channel, you know that I am always making blasphemous claims, so let me explain. In my iPhone XR video, I told you that the iPhone 16e was replacing that phone and line, and it was true. Not only is the 16e very similar to the iPhone 14 in a few ways, but it is a higher-end single-camera phone. This has the same dimensions and similar build to the iPhone 14, but coming in at 167 grams, which is kind of impressive, but also a single rear camera makes this reasonable. The back is a matte glass panel with a mic hole, camera flash, and a big single camera bump. Honestly, if this had a 200 megapixel large sensor setup, this would be the king, but it's not for many reasons, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Then the frame is aluminum, having nothing on the top, volume and action buttons on the left side, a lovely addition. The right side has the side button for weak Siri and powering the phone, no SIM tray anywhere, while the bottom has the holes for the microphone and bottom speaker, as well as the USB-C 2.0 port that allows for slow transfer speeds, but also 27 watts of wired charging, which is actually pretty fast for an iPhone. The bottom speaker pairs with the top earpiece to give a great stereo feel, but all of this isn't really that impressive for the price. Just like the screen. No joke, this screen is literally an iPhone 14 screen, just with the bottom screw prongs being in a different place. Regardless, this is a 5.78 inch tall phone that has a 6.1 inch 1170p flexible OLED panel that has a notch at the top for Face ID, runs at 60 Hz max, and gives us 1200 nits of peak brightness, or 800 nits in manual mode, which is actually still pretty bright. The screen is covered by ceramic shield, and as I always say, it'll break if you try. Honestly, I love this design. It's a great, simple design, but I do understand if people think that this phone is terrible value thanks to that 60 Hz panel, which, don't worry, I also agree to. This phone is IP68 dust and water resistant for now, but supports Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.3, but ironically no ultra-wideband at all, whether we're talking about 5G or the one used for proximity tracking, which I'm saying is ironic because the iPhone XR also lacks that, but the iPhone 11 has the ultra-wideband for tracking. At least it still has 5G support and emergency SOS satellite connectivity, just like the 14. It also has Qi charging, so 7.5 watts with no MagSafe, but you can kind of add it. It doesn't really work that well though. It also comes with a 4005 mAh battery, which sounds massive, but works for this phone thanks to the processor. This would be the Apple A18, the same chip found in the iPhone 16, just with the 4-core GPU instead of 5 cores, and about a 15 to 20% performance drop. CPU-wise, essentially the same chip, maybe just the bottom of the barrel of the QC testing chips. That said, this phone feels like the iPhone 12 that I used, but faster. Like all 60 Hz iDevices, this phone suffers a terrible fate, iOS 26. It's really odd that it affects the performance, as iOS 18 was pretty solid on this phone. But to be fair, iOS 26 is not as terrible as it could be, given that this phone is almost made for it. Gaming is great, apps are great, and for the price, it's a solid device, unlike the dead-on-arrival iPhone SE line. This also comes with 128 to 512 gigabytes of storage, as well as 8 gigabytes of RAM, doubling that capacity of storage and RAM compared to the 64 gigabyte storage and only 4 gigabytes of RAM on the iPhone 12 and SE 2022. But going back to the battery, it's okay. The battery performance may be great given the expected demographic, but for me, it feels a lot like the iPhone 12 battery being good, but also confusing since the battery is almost twice the size. Is the processor in the Apple C1 modem that inefficient? What feels efficient is the camera set. Now, this may be a deal breaker, so hopefully you're sitting down for this, but there's no ultra-wide camera on here. Yeah, I know. The widest camera that you get on this phone is 23 millimeters from the front camera, which is essentially the same 12 megapixel camera, which is found in pretty much every iPhone from the iPhone 11 until the 16 series, with this one being focusable just like the 16 series, which is great. This is a solid camera, and focusing is always great to see, as well as 4K 60 frames per second for video capture. The rear, however, is very strange. Since the iPhone 13 and technically the 12 Pro Max, we get sensor shift stabilization. The 16E, however, does not have that and has normal optical image stabilization, which is still good to see and definitely expected. It's a 48 megapixel sensor, which has been a staple since the iPhone 14 Pro/iPhone 15. The sensor size, however, is 1/2.55 inches, which is actually small and not terrible, but the last iPhone with that size was the iPhone 12 series and the SE 2022. But the latter gets a pass since it's the same sensor as the iPhone 8. Now, does this affect quality? Well, I'll let you be the judge compared to an iPhone 12, which has a 12 megapixel 1/2.55 inch sensor as well, but we can see how much that 48 megapixel or computational photography works to get the photo. No reason to really hate on this camera though. Shots still look great, and the 4K 60 frames per second still looks pretty solid on this phone. But for a higher end phone with a sensor size smaller than the iPhone 13, just seems weird. They could have slapped the iPhone 15 camera in here. It can't be that much cheaper if I can get it for this price, while the 16E is this. Who knows why they did that? What I do know is that the camera sensor is great, but a high megapixel micro four thirds or even an APS-C sensor in a phone with a 24mm equivalent would be my dream camera phone. One day. This phone is actually great, and with the iPhone 17e, it's even better. The iPhone 18e will probably have an upgraded screen, but we won't see that until 2027, maybe. Until then, the small upgrades to the 17e have simply not been worth the price difference, and in the used market, this is where this phone thrives. Normally, this is where I say the iPhone 16 is the same used as the iPhone 16e, but that's simply not true, which makes the 16e a great choice. Inferior camera set and screen, but only barely. The 16 ironically has a smaller battery but better efficiency somehow, so the 16e battery is considered bad. But still, I think this is a solid phone, and like the 16, not great close to that MSRP, but under $400 for an unlocked one. This ends up being a budget king, but with a weird camera and unfortunate screen. But like I said, when you get used to this phone, there really aren't any issues. Like a normal cheap Apple product, you still get quality with some cut corners that are deal breakers for some, but for others, it's just another part to fail. Now, I wouldn't buy this phone. For the used prices, this ranges from 13 Pro to 15 Pro prices, and I would probably go with a 14 Pro over this, but there are some downsides. Battery life and quality of life updates like the action button and USB-C make the 15 Pro a better option, but at a similar price. Somehow, the iPhone 16e is actually a great value, but thanks to that used market and the fact that the 17e really isn't that much better. I can't believe it, but in 2026, I'm actually enjoying this phone and contradicting the first sentence in my final thoughts. What a time to be alive. And that's my review of the iPhone 16e, the good economy phone in the used market. But what do you think? Am I wearing apple-shaped rose-colored glasses? Let me know, and as always, thanks for joining the 1%, and thanks for watching.